Ian Parker, my beautiful partner in podcasting and combat sports. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, bro. I didn't like having a week off last week. I miss it. It feels very bizarre when there's no MMA for a week, but now we got this week, and then we have the next couple months fully packed. I'm ready to rock, bro. Let's get it.
I
Let's
feel
go.
like I was the personification of the SpongeBob meme sitting in the cafe, just alone looking at his coffee. That was me all Saturday. So happy to be back, Ian. We have a great card coming up this weekend on Saturday. And, this is really a sleeper card, one of those for fans like you and I that we can really dive into. It's UFC Vegas 28, Rozenstruik versus Sakai at the UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Ian, this is one of those cards where some of it is the fact that we haven't had a card and, the tension's building up, but I am just super excited. What are your initial thoughts on the card overall?
I think sometimes what MMA fans have to realize that there's so many fight cards that, yes, sometimes you don't always get the biggest names, but sometimes those are where the best fights happen. There's a lot of good guys on this card that we'll discuss during the show that are up and comers, some that are already established prospects. And then there are guys like Marcin who's on a 4-fight win streak looking to break through into the top 5 with a win over Walt. So, you got to sometimes put those big names to the side and just really have a love for the sport. And what's great about this too is that there's so many bettable fights because sometimes Vegas doesn't even understand it. And that's where we capitalize. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, and this is going to be a hell of a month for combat sports, Ian, because it's not just the UFC, it's the UFC, PFL, Bellator, maybe one championship. If there's any odds that Ian likes, we're going to talk about them here on Combat Coach. So without further ado, we're going to hop into it. The first fight is at lightweight, Claudio Pueles plus 175 versus Jordan Levitt minus 215. El Nino out of Peru is 9-2. He actually lists Cambridge College as one of his achievements, so that's pretty impressive. He's going up against the Monkey King, 8-0. He has a Dana White Contender Series win and a UFC win. Ian, where do you see this fight playing out?
This is a hard one to cap. Pueles is he's a good fighter that's kind of flown under the radar. But what I think everyone's kind of excited about is Jordan Levitt. From the Contender Series, you got a guy who is unorthodox, flamboyant, fun, got a really quirky personality, but he's slamming guys and knocking them out. Granted, it was Matt Wyman who hasn't won since 1932, but you still have a guy who is one of the better jiu-jitsu fighters on the planet that people just also don't know about. I think at minus 215, it's a really tough fight to cap. If you're going to do this, Jordan Levitt would be the play for me, but I would put him in a parlay.
Well, and you don't want to be sweating that first fight of the night. So take Ian's advice and take it for what you will. So the second fight of the night is at featherweight. It's Sean Woodson, the American, minus 185 versus Youssef Zalal plus 155. The Moroccan Devil is 10-4, 3-2 in the UFC. But Ian, as I was saying to you, very young, already has some adversity. But how do you see this fight playing out?
I think this is a terrible matchup for Youssef Zalal. I think this is what the UFC is saying. Hey, this is an opportunity here to get a big win over a really talented prospect in Sean Woodson. However, you're going to have to overcome major adversity. Zalal fancies himself a striker with decent grappling. The problem, though, is that he only goes to grapple when he's desperate. And that's a bad move against a guy like Woodson, who's very good at timing knees on guys coming in for shots. So Woodson's going to have the reach to be the better striker. We also, Woodson, his last fight, dominate Julian Rosa. Then he got tagged at the end of the third round and submitted. One of those fluky-ish type of situations, although it's MMA, anything can happen. I love Sean Woodson in this spot. I just think the reach, the striking, and as long as he doesn't get caught on the ground, which I don't think Zalal has that in him, I like Woodson here a lot.
Not always about the number. It's about how the fight is going to play out. The insight and analysis there from Ian Parker at Ian Parker MMA if you want more info. The next fight is at women's flyweight. Manon Fiora minus 555 versus Tabitha Ricci plus 380. Ian, we use this word a lot. Prohibitive favorite Fiora minus 555. For the record, what's your pick?
I like Fiora here. Again, very high in the odds. And I actually would not touch an under or over. We saw in the last fight, she's built different, man. These are one of these female prospects, women's fighters that come in. We don't see this type of striking very often, or the power that she carries. They had to stop the fight due to a TKO because she broke her opponent's nose to the point where the doctor wouldn't let it go. And that has nothing to do with being male or female. That always comes down to where the cut is, where the break is, and how that impacts a fighter moving forward. And the nose was so broken, the blood was all over the place that actually the girl said that she was dizzy and her eye vision was almost so messed up too. Tabitha Ricci's not a bad fighter, just on short notice against such a striker in Fiora. I like Fiora here, again, at minus 500 plus. You have to throw that in a parlay, maybe. Otherwise, I would sit back and watch her growth because she's going to be someone to keep an eye on moving forward.
Well, and great analysis there, and great matchup. The French woman 6-1 versus the Brazilian 5-0. So some young prospects there for the UFC fans moving ahead. But moving
Yep.
ahead in this card, we're going to go to the lightweight division. Alon Patrick plus 250 versus Mason Jones minus 310. Nuget, the 15-3 overall Brazilian, is facing off against the Dragon 10-1 Welshman. In the last fight that Mason Jones had, the 10-1 record or 10-0 record had to come to an end. But where do you see this fight going for the Dragon?
That was a fantastic fight. I actually thought he won that. I think Mason Jones is a very solid prospect. I think this is a good fight to come back into. Alon Patrick, I think everyone kind of got a little too ahead of themselves with his surprise win over whoever. I forgot who it was. I apologize, but he was a big underdog. He can't knock him out. And his last fight against Scott Holtzman, he just didn't throw anything. That was a big issue for me with Alon Patrick. He's been around for a while. He's a talented guy. But when you kind of get a bad injury that puts you out for a while and you don't throw any punches, literally zero volume, he's going to have a big issue because Mason Jones is a truck. He's a juggernaut. He's going to come forward. He's going to cause a rampage. And I think Mason Jones is absolutely a guy you put in your parlay. I believe he's minus 250 to minus 300 in that range. It's been going back and forth. But he's the play right there in a parlay 100%, Mason Jones.
And that last fight was against Bobby Green there for the record.
Thank you, Bobby Green. And
decision.
at the time, yeah, no one expected. Oh, that was Alon Patrick's last fight against Bobby Green, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, he threw literally nothing, and this was a guy that everyone was kind of excited about because the fight before that, which was 2 years ago, huge underdog, and he just ripped the guy apart. So very bizarre, but Alon Patrick's just not the same guy that we thought he was going to be.
Interesting fight and a hot prospect there in Mason Jones.
Absolutely.
Next at featherweight is someone you might call a former hot prospect, Makwan Amirkhani, Mr. Finland, minus 195, coming into this fight 16-5 overall, 6-3 in the UFC out of SBG Ireland. He's going up against Kamuela Kirk, the Jawaian. I have no idea what that means. 11-4 overall, making his UFC debut. Ian, how do you see this fight playing out?
I like Amirkhani here. He's coming off a win, a nice bounce back after losing to Edson Barbosa. I just think this is a guy that has finally kind of put the ego to the side. He's no longer trying to be the Conor McGregor mentality or the talker. He knows what he's great at, and that's being on the ground, being in top position, getting the submissions. He's just got to watch out for getting into a brawl. Sometimes he gets that cockiness when he lands one punch. For Amirkhani, it's very simple. Get this fight to the ground as soon as possible. Not many guys can handle him on top. That's probably going to happen here, so I like Amirkhani as well.
Well, great analysis. And I think it's a very frustrating fighter to watch sometimes because he does have a flashy style. He has a confidence about him, but then, sometimes he's sitting there at the end of the third round on his back with just like this look on his face of what do I do? And you never like to see that as a fan. Next at welterweight, though, someone that UFC fans have been fans of for a long time, Francisco Trinaldo, plus 195. He's going up against Muslim Salikov with one of the best names in MMA, the king of Kung Fu. He's a minus 250 favorite with a 17-2 record versus Trinaldo on the other side, 26-7. Ian, veteran versus newcomer somewhat. Where do you see this fight playing out?
Man, Trinaldo is literally the fountain of youth. Dude's like, what is he, 38, 39 years old? And
he's older than you are. Do I stand corrected?
Yeah, I'm not that old, but thank you.
You look 24.
There you go. I don't feel it. Here's what I will tell you about this fight. Salikov just has to be smart. This is a nice step up in competition from his last fight. This is a guy that fancies himself a grappler. Also, as you said, with the Kung Fu aspect of it, he is a very good striker. Trinaldo is a black belt in judo, black belt in karate as well. He's also a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, very well-rounded. But with him, he's all about the counters. He throws very hard kicks, but he just doesn't throw a lot. A lot of these guys lately have been very hesitant to throw. I guess they want to pace themselves. With a guy like Salikov, though, his cardio has never been in question. I think as long as he pressures Trinaldo, as long as he even puts Trinaldo on his back and can get into half guard and not remain in the guard all too long, Salikov is the correct favorite here, and I believe he gets it done.
Well, the next fight, Ian, is my sleeper fight of the night for this card. It's one that I am definitely going to tune into because of Tanner Boser at heavyweight. He's a minus 190 favorite against Ilir Latifi at plus 155. The Bulldozer is a 19-7-1 overall record. He's 3-2 in the UFC, but his last loss was to Cyril Gahn in 2019. So a future contender there. He's going up against the Swedish Sledgehammer, 14-8 overall, 7-6 in the UFC for the veteran. Ian, how do you see this fight going at heavyweight?
Tanner Boser should be minus 300 here. So at minus 190, is that what you said it's at right now? Yep. This is a no-brainer play. His last fight, I believe he actually lost to Andrei Arlovsky, recently. So with Tanner Boser, you have a guy who I believe can be a future champ. That's just because strictly his athleticism, his movement, his cardio, his fight against Arlovsky, he just wasn't finding his range. And that happens. You're going to run into that once in a while. Sometimes when you're fighting a guy like Arlovsky, who's been around forever and loses a lot, you don't expect him to stay aggressive. You don't expect him to take some of the punches he was taking, especially when Arlovsky is not known for his chin. However, Ilir Latifi is a very one-dimensional fighter. He is a sledgehammer. He's going to throw that overhand right, bull rush you, and try to slam you. And then when he's on top, doesn't have much of a jiu-jitsu game. He just tries to power it out. I believe Tanner Boser's speed and takedown defense will be the key here. There's no question in my mind he gets this done. I wish he was on the main card. I feel like he deserves that spot. But here nor there, this is a good bounce-back fight for him. Give me Tanner Boser.
Well, I tend to agree with you about card placement there, but next in this card placement is the end of the preliminary card on ESPN Plus. You're not going to have to move. The main card is still on ESPN Plus. Don't worry. Women's flyweights, Montana De La Rosa -275 versus Ariana Lipsky +215. De La Rosa, the former tough contestant, 11-6-1 overall. She's 4-2 in the UFC. Goes up against the Queen of Violence, 13-6 overall, but she's 2-3 in the UFC. Ian, this should be a great matchup to end the preliminary card, but how do you see this playing out with the bettors?
I don't like how big of a favorite De La Rosa is, although she deserves to be the favorite. I was kind of hoping it was more of like a -170 because I'd be all over that play. The problem with Montana De La Rosa is her striking is very predictable. She's one of those people that wants to get the fight to the ground, be on top in jiu-jitsu. Lipsky has fought better strikers and has had some success. However, she is also somebody that I think people were very high on her early on, and then she fell off. And then she had got a couple of unexpected wins, like that one submission she had. I think it was like a knee bar where she was getting smoked, and she pulled that one out. And then we saw against Shevchenko, she got crucifixed and pounded out in submission. It's one of those fights where De La Rosa will control where this fight goes. And for her, there's no question she's way better on the ground. Lipsky gets very panicky when she's on her back. And that's going to happen, I think, probably in the second round. I like De La Rosa here. Odds are too high to go straight. I don't have a problem if you parlay her, though. She should get the win here. I would be really shocked if she lost, to be honest.
And it's all about taking the info. You can't just be taking people's, pocket plays there and throwing them out into the ether. You have to be taking the information, take the analysis from Ian Parker here. And if you want more, follow Ian Parker MMA on social media. As we kick off the main card, we're still on ESPN Plus at middleweight. Tom Breese -250 versus Antonio Arroyo +195. Breese is 12-3 from Birmingham, UK. Arroyo 9-4 from Supara, Brazil. I'm too white to get that. But Ian, that doesn't mean we can't give some gambling plays. How do you see this fight going?
I do like Breese here. I think Arroyo is sneaky good. I just think that he just, what's the word for it? His confidence gets shot pretty quickly. What happens is that when he uses that calf kick, he's very good at it. The minute he gets punched or the minute he gets taken down, his game's completely thrown off. And Breese is excellent in getting guys off balance, taking angles, and putting guys on their back when they don't want to be. And Arroyo does not like being on his back. If I'm Arroyo, I'm keep using my jab. I'm using the calf kick to try and slow Breese down because you got another guy who's like a juggernaut. He's going to come right for you. He's going to swing hard. But he's pretty tactical. He's not very wild. He's not reckless. I really like Breese as a prospect here. I think Arroyo's in trouble in this fight. I think the odds make sense. Again, though, too high for a straight play. I just don't see Arroyo getting smarter as he fights. It's literally the same thing every time. Lands a few calf kicks. The other fighter doesn't like it, takes him down, and then Arroyo gives up. So I think that's going to be the same thing here. I like Breese.
And that's the fight that I would swap with the heavyweight fight on the preliminary card. If I was playing matchmaker, that's the one I would kick off with. But
I would agree.
We are not. We're just here giving gambling plays. This take where, Ian? Straight to the pay window. But coming up next at middleweight is a fight where I needed the professional Ian Parker to come in here and give me some enthusiasm because he is super excited for this fight at middleweight. Dusko Todorovich -135 versus Gregory Rodriguez +105. Thunder is 10-1. He just lost to Puna Soriano and got rid of that undefeated record. He goes up against RoboCop 9-3, the LFA champ making his UFC debut. Ian, I know that you're hyped for this fight, but tell the fans why.
You know what? I'm interested. You got a guy in Rodriguez from the LFA, who just won the title and then is turning it around pretty quickly. And he did really, he was excellent in that fight in LFA. If anyone checked him out, I suggest you do. He's a very impressive fighter. You got to, when you get guys that are champions from other organizations, you have to look at them differently as prospects. To be a champion in LFA, you have to fight guys with winning records. You're not fighting cans. You're not padding your record because these organizations funnel into the UFC for a reason. LFA is very strong like that. And then you got a guy in Dusko who everyone his first fight was so impressed. Fought Soriano, right? And he was the favorite. in that fight, it was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. But Dusko is also a really good wrestler. But it just showed me that he was more about trying to prove to the world that he could knock people out quick instead of winning a very dangerous fight, a stylistic fight that obviously didn't play into his favor here. This one may be no different. Rodriguez is very well rounded. He carries a lot of power. You know, if I'm everyone, the under may be the way to go in this one, to be honest with you. Or again, maybe one of those fights where you kind of sit back and enjoy what may be a ton of violence in a fun MMA way. Because really, Dusko should win this fight based on experience. He should win based on his wrestling and not just his power. The problem is that, can you trust him? I don't know. After 2 fights in the UFC, he won really quick by knockout, and then he lost really quick by knockout. So in that situation, if you even want to play Rodriguez because of the dog money, I understand. But it's also really hard to place a guy with his UFC debut with these type of styles. This is going to be a war. It's either going to be a bloody war for 3 rounds or end very quickly. So I'm going to sit back on this one. Sometimes the best bet is not making one. And this is probably that fight.
So what you're saying is sometimes with Thunder, you want to see a little more lightning.
Yeah, I would say so. Maybe even a little bit of rain.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
But moving on next to welterweight is Santiago Ponzinibio -105 versus Miguel Baez at -125. The Ponzi scheme 27-4, former tough contestant, 9-3 in the UFC, lost his last fight. Goes up against Caramel Thunder at 10-0. He's 3-0 in the UFC, Dana White Contender Series veteran. And this fight has nothing but fireworks written all over it. But where do you see it playing out?
This to me is actually the most exciting, interesting fight on the entire card, because we're going to see a guy in Miguel Baez. Are you really ready for the top guys? And is Ponzinibio still one of those top guys? You know, with Ponzinibio, what we saw is a guy that was ready to fight Kamaru Usman for the belt, right? He was 3 years ago. This guy was unstoppable. He was knocking people out. He was just dominant over guys that were never being dominated, like that Neil Magny fight. We never saw Neil Magny until he fought Michael Chiesa, but that was also 2 years later, get dominated that way. And Ponzinibio, well, his development was just pure. It was fluid. It was organic. It wasn't being forced. 3 years off, he comes back and fights the Leech, where the Leech is not known for being a technical striker. He's known for just, being like a Korean zombie-ish type of style. Get hit to get to hit. And Ponzinibio got knocked out in the first round. We've never seen that, right? Then you get a guy in Miguel Baez who is doing it the right way. He fought Matt Brown. Then he took on that Japanese prospect, and we saw him win by submission. Not something he's known for. In fact, he had no submissions on his record, even as a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which shows me that this guy is evolving. He's not just a knockout artist. And in the Matt Brown fight, he got tagged really early. He got dropped. He got back up, won that round. Second round, he finished it. If I'm going to play this fight, betting-wise, and we talk about education, because it's so high in the card, if you are up money, I would throw a little bit on Miguel Baez here. I kind of really think that this is a guy, matchup-wise, that the striker in Ponzinibio, it's not something that Miguel hasn't seen before, But if we see the Pons that from 3 years ago, Miguel's in trouble. I just don't know if that guy exists anymore. I don't know if those injuries really plagued him, so I am going to go with Miguel Baez here.
Well, and all the fans will know his nickname is the Argentine Dagger for everybody, not the Ponzi scheme. So just having a little fun. But Ian might
calling him the Pons. I just think that's awesome. Hey,
Well, Ian might think that the Argentine Dagger is a little dull. So take that information and bring it straight to the pay win.
After that last fight, that dagger was very dull. I like the Pons.
As we move on this card, Ian, we're only moving up in weight from here on out. At middleweight is Roman Dolidze at -145 versus Laureano Stropoli +115. Dolidze is 8-1, 2-1 in the UFC. Pepe 2-2 in the UFC. He's lost his last 2 though going into this fight. But Ian, how do you see this fight playing out for the bettors?
Here's the thing with Roman Dolidze. In our last fight, what did I tell everybody? If this guy is hesitant, if he drops for heel hooks and doesn't hit the fighter on his back, he will risk losing a decision. And he lost a split decision, although I did think that he won. His cardio also faded because he was just throwing too much power in his punches. Stropoli was a very surprise win over Joaquin Buckley with the head kick. You can't really judge, though. I don't really base a guy's overall resume off of one kick that landed. That was literally it. The biggest difference here is Dolidze's ground game. He will put Stropoli on his back and get the win here. If he doesn't, the UFC should, because this is a guy that's known for his grappling, dominant grappler, has great heel hooks, but you don't need to go for those when the guys are all sweaty because then you give up position. And Storopoli's not going to jump on top. He'll force the fight back to the feet. I like Roman Dolidze here.
Well, it's going to be exciting, but Ian, the time to go to the bathroom is going to be over after that fight because we have 2 heavyweight fights in the co-main and main event of this UFC Vegas
Yeah.
28 card on ESPN Plus going down this Saturday. Don't miss it. And obviously, follow Ian Parker on MMA, at Ian Parker MMA on Twitter to get all of those MMA insights. He will always be responsive on fight night. But for the co-main event, we have Walt Harris, the big ticket, plus 150 against Marcin Tybura, minus 180. Tybura is 21-6. He has a 4-fight win streak. He's 8-5 in the UFC. He goes up against the big ticket, 13-9. We don't have to go through any of the things that Walt has faced outside of the octagon. He goes inside of the octagon against Tybura Saturday night. And how does this fight go, Ian Parker?
Yeah, you made a good point. Tabura in 2020, 4-0. Walt Harris 0-2. Walt Harris has not changed his game. He's a good athlete, good striker, but gasses out in the second round, does not have a good chin, and he's also very inadequate off his back. We've seen Tabura really evolve his game, cardio-wise, output. In the fight against Rothwell, put him on his back, was able to grind out a decision over 3 rounds. We've seen this before. We saw him take the punches from Hardy, come back and knock out Greg Hardy. To me, this is Marcin Tybura's limelight spot. This is really where he needs to shine, and I believe this is the perfect matchup for him. Give me Tybura on this one all day.
Tybura heavyweight is that pick in the co-main event for Ian Parker. And we're going to move swiftly along into the heavyweight matchup here. Headlining this card, we got Jairzinho Rozenstruik minus 120 versus Augusto Sakai minus 110. A very close matchup here, according to my bookie, where we get all of our odds. Biggie Boy is 11-2. He goes up against Sakai 15-2-1. He's 4-1 in the UFC. Ian, two really interesting heavyweights here. I'd love to hear your analysis just on the different styles at play, striker versus grappler. How do you see this fight going and the main event?
Well, what's interesting, though, is that Sakai's actually a really strong kickboxer also. And we saw that in his fight against Alistair Overeem. He was beating Overeem pretty decisively, but then Overeem put him on his back, and Overeem is just a better grappler. Sakai is, as you said, on top, excellent off his back. Most heavyweights, unless you're Fabrizio Verdum, are not all that savvy off your back with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but Sakai, in my opinion, is the play here. I thought he would have been the favorite. When it comes to Rozenstruik, outside of the few knockouts we saw, what have we really seen? Counter striker, just very low output in the fight against Overeem. If he doesn't land that buzzer, he loses all 5 rounds, and it's the truth. Sakai will bring the pressure. Sakai, if he puts Rozenstruik on his back, we have seen Rozenstruik been able to get up pretty quickly. However, I don't know if he's able to do that against Sakai. Sakai's a really big heavyweight. He knows how to really distribute his weight. He knows how to be heavy on top. And I just think that Sakai's output compared to Rozenstruik's zero output, literally the guy does not throw a lot. And I'm very shocked for someone who's such a strong kickboxer, world champion, that he just has not changed that. He's fought a lot in the last couple of years. He really hasn't been in the UFC that long. So in my opinion, Sakai at plus money or even almost even money is the way to go here. I thought he would have been like a minus 130 because of the Overeem fight. Look, he lost to Overeem, but Rozenstruik beat Dos Santos, lost prior to that fight. He's 2-2. And I just think Sakai has more tools to get it done. So I like Augusto Sakai here.
Well, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert at heavyweight MMA math. I think anyone would be kind of naive to think that they are, but very good information there from Ian Parker. The only math that I need is the value plays. Like you said, you have to be looking at these odds, and that's why I go to my man, Ian Parker. And you know why I go to you, Ian Parker?
Why is that, sir?
Because I take your numbers and I go straight to the pay window. That's it. That's Combat Coach. We're going to be back every week with UFC previews, Bellator previews. If you heard Ian's beautiful pronunciation of Verdum there, you'll know that he is entrenched with the PFL. We're going to have previews for that too. Everything's coming your way. Subscribe to this channel. Ian Parker MMA, Cody Merrow, and we are out.